بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome. Thank you for bringing your heart today. So I know today we're going to be continuing with part 3 of the 10 core principles of truth, and it's going to be the last part of that topic. But before I get into the last 2 principles, we finished the 8 principles last time, and today I'm going to go over the 9th and 10th principle. For those who are not familiar, we're going over the 10 core principles of sacred authenticity, sitk and haqq, through the home method, the heart over mind and ego method. So before I begin, I wanted to address something that I've been seeing a lot, especially these days, and it's just a reminder to myself and to all of you to beware of hopelessness getting into the heart. There's a lot going on, and there is a lot of chaos in our external world, and I'm seeing this increasing mindset of what's the point? Because we look at the world and we see such chaos, and we see a lot of things going on, and when we compare that to our own lives, as you go about your school day, as you go about work, as you go about, being there for your family or anything that you're doing, I think it can really get to a point where you're comparing, and you're like, well, compared to what's going on over there, what difference does it make me showing up in my family, for my family? What difference does it make me going to work, me succeeding academically even? And so this is what Shaitan wants. He wants people to be in that state of hopelessness. He wants people to be in that state of, oh, there's too much chaos in the world. It's too overwhelming. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do to make a difference. And that's actually the opposite of what we are taught in Islam. It's the complete opposite. And I think, with everything, it's so overwhelming, it's so chaotic. Everything we see that we're flooded with on social media is destruction, on the highest level, right? And you think of yourself as like, I'm this tiny, dot in the universe. How am I going to resolve all of this, right? Or what's the point of me doing this small good compared to the destruction that's going on in the world? But I want to remind you of the hadith, and I mentioned this hadith before, but I want to continue to remind you of it. The hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that even if the day of judgment is befalling you and you're planting something as small as a sapling, a small plant, still plant it. And I want you to think about this. There's nothing as chaotic, as destructive, as great as the day of judgment, right? Where literally everything gets destroyed, everything gets wiped out. This world that we know exists that will no longer exist, right? And yet even then, this hadith is so powerful, because even then the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that if you are doing good, even something as small as planting a sapling, to still do it. Why? It has something to do with hope, where your hope is placed. And I think that part of the problem today is our hope is placed in the wrong thing, in the wrong place, and in everywhere other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I mean by that is that if for you to still plant that plant and to feel like so connected to, I'm going to plant this and I'm going to still do it, where does your hope have to lie? In Allah, right? It has to lie only in Allah, because He's the one who's constant. He's the one who never dies. He's the one who sees. He's the one who hears. He's the one who rewards, right? So your hope has to be anchored in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your hope has to be anchored in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you anchor it in anything other than Allah, you will become hopeless really fast. When we look at depression from a clinical lens, a lot of, just the presentation of depression, especially clinically, is very much related to hopelessness. And one of the models that explains depression explains it through that link between how our moods and our state and that sense of hopelessness, where you don't see you don't have positive feelings about the future. Another Perspective is that depression is very much related to a negative sense of self, a negative sense view towards the world and towards the future. That's another model that explains depression. And so think about, your perception of what's happening, of the future, because that's what really hopelessness is rooted in. It's like, what's the point of me doing this? It holds nothing for me in the future, essentially. That's really what we say, right? That's literally what people are experiencing when they are hopeless. They feel like what they're doing now has no significance for them in the time to come. So then that actually speaks to where the hope is placed. It's placed in a future outcome. It's not placed in what Allah holds for you. It's not placed in Allah rewarding you. It's not placed in the akhirah. It's placed in the future in this world. So there is an emphasis in our faith to constantly make sure that our hope is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the fact that He is the constant in our life. And no matter, even if, and I give this example a lot, where even if you, how do I say this? If today is your last day, it's not going to matter to you what happens to Gaza tomorrow, right? It's it. It's a wrap. What's going to matter to you is what you present to Allah in your book. That's what's going to matter to you. So what is the value of this book? It's your intentions, really your intentions. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Verily your actions are by your intentions. And your efforts and your actions, what you did. And that's what's going to matter to you. So if you go into this state of what's the point? What's the point of me going to school? What's the point of me doing good? What's the point of me showing up? What's the point of me being present? What's the point of me, being the best person I can be here and all these areas of my life? You're literally like wrapping up your book early. And you're judging it by what's happening in the world, when Allah's actually giving you another breath, another day, another life, another time to show up and to maximize your potential, and you're saying, there's no point. And imagine Allah's looking at you, I give you another day. And here you are walking with that attitude of what's the point? I want you to imagine this, like what we say when we don't, not through words, but through our actions. When you don't show up, when you're not present, when you are on cruise control, when you're just going through the motions and you're thinking there's no point in really giving something your all, you're really saying that this day that Allah gave you has no meaning when it does. And I think there's a lot of power in that Allah does not hold you responsible for the outcomes of the world. He does not hold you responsible for what happens tomorrow to Gaza, in Gaza. He doesn't hold you responsible for what is beyond your capacity. But as long as He has given you a day, and as long as He has given you a breath, and as long as He has given you life, your attitude should be, how can I maximize it? How can I show up? How can I become more intentional? How can I be more connected to what I'm doing? Because this what's the point is growing. And if you don't nip it in the bud, when you recognize it within yourself and you start shifting your hope and you say, wait, where am I placing my hope? Is it in Allah or is it in, the world? So like, for example, you make dua for Gaza, you look to Gaza, nothing changed, so you feel hopeless. So then where's your hope? In the world, in the outcome of the world. In how things are going. So, and also what you physically see is not really the entire reality. We don't know what Allah's doing, beyond the veil. We don't fully comprehend Allah's wisdom, but we know He has a plan. We know He has wisdom. But our question is like, what role can I play? Like, I just want to share in the reward. I want to share in the reward. I want, when my book is wrapped, that I can stand on what I did. I can stand on sound intentions. I can stand on the fact that I showed up to where Allah has placed me. A lot of us, we talked about this more after October 7th last year. And the concept of survivor's guilt, right? The excessive guilt that a lot of people feel for, it's human. You know, you're in comfort, you're going about your day. I mean, I can't stop thinking about it, right? Like you get up, you go to the bathroom, you get water, you're thinking of people without water. You have a bite to eat, you're thinking of a child who hasn't eaten for a few days. You know, you drink a sip of water, you can't help but think of the many faces we saw that are trying to get water from a crack in the floor, in the ground in Gaza, right? So it's human to not be okay with what's going on. But don't let that empathy become unproductive. You know, don't let your if your survivor's guilt is making you complacent, if your survivor's guilt is making you not show up powerfully to your life, if your survivor's guilt is making you not get up for tahajjud, is making you miss your prayers, is making you not worship Allah, is making you have this what's the point attitude, then we have missed the point. Really, and I'm going to say that again. If your feelings towards what's happening in the world is making you complacent and not show up powerfully, especially to your acts of worship and to your life, and you're starting to have that what's the point, then you have missed the point. So just a reminder to myself and to you to recalibrate, you know, renew your intentions. Ask Allah to utilize you. You know, ask Allah to make sure that your hope is anchored in Him above all else, because He is the ever living. He never dies, right? He is constant in our lives, always there, as-Sami' al-Basir, always seeing, always hearing. Everything you do matters to Him, and I think that's really what, you know, we're so disconnected from in this world. It's like we are programmed in this world to look for value in the external. So one of the things that I think is actually like rooted in this issue of what's the point is, in the West, we are programmed to link our comfort to our external environment, right? So like, and if you think about all the messages and all the, you know, social media, the lifestyles, the perfect lifestyles we see on social media, right? We are programmed to associate an externally comfortable lifestyle with I'm safe, I'm good. I can now show up to my life. I can now do what I need to do because everything is perfect around me. I have that, you know, boho living room. I have, you know, comfortable, environment. This is my peace. And now I can actually show up to my life. We function in our society based on the premise of I need to feel a certain way before I act. That's how we function. I need it's like backwards. It's really backwards. Like, think about it. I need my external environment to be good so I can be good, and I need to feel a certain way so that I can do good. And so where's your internal locus of control? Your control is outward. If I can control what's around me, then I will feel good. And if I feel good, then I could do what I need to do. But it's actually the opposite oftentimes. You need to do what it serves you in order for you to feel good. Behaviors oftentimes precede feeling good. And if you wait to feel good to show up to what you need to do, you are not going to actually create and cultivate a healthy life for yourself. A life of potential, a life of purpose, a life of success for this dunya and the akhirah. You won't, because the formula doesn't work. If you live your life based on the formula of I need to feel so I can do, you won't do and you won't feel what you need to feel. So it's a very vicious cycle. And a lot of people get stuck in this phase of I'm waiting to feel a certain way. How come I don't feel a certain way? I see this a lot with procrastinating. Like a lot of times people will say like, I'm procrastinating because I feel a certain way. And then when I flip it, oftentimes, I say, what if you feel a certain way because you're procrastinating? It's like, whoa, wait. No, help me fix the feeling so that I stop procrastinating. And I'm like, wait, you know that if you just actually do something, you will shift yourself internally. So we don't want to hear that. Why? Because for you to do the latter, for you to start with behaviors, you actually have to conquer what? your nafs, your like lower self, it's like, wait, I'm uncomfortable. What are you doing to me? Like I like to be comfortable, right? And so for you to actually start with behavior, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to sit with that discomfort, that, those feelings that we don't like. So, yeah, and it's very much related to these last two principles that we're going to talk about today. But I just wanted to start off with that because when I see a common trend and a common thing that's happening, and I do recognize, and I myself, I mean, I'm overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, and it can get, pretty overwhelming, right? And that's why. But I also know that if I don't, as I'm absorbing what's happening in the world, if I don't check my own attitudes internally, my own perception, and where I'm anchored, it's going to exacerbate, or it's going to, it's going to not help me process what I'm witnessing in the best way. So whatever we absorb, we need Allah to help us process, and we need to make sure that we're still anchored in the right things. We need to make sure that we're anchored in truth, which now is a good segue to go into these last two principles. So the 9th principle of the 10 core principles of sacred authenticity is truth does not bend to our desire. I'm going to say that again. The 9th principle is truth does not bend to our desire. So this is really important for the times we live in, where the opposite message is being constantly promoted, which is what? No. We can bend truth to fit our desire. That's literally like the world we live in. We live in a time where people think truth actually should bend to their desire, essentially to their lower self or nafs. And many people actually attempt to change what is true to accommodate their desires. So we encounter a truth and we feel like, no, this doesn't fit. This can't be true. Let me find a way around it so that I can feel good. So where's your center point? It's you feeling good. It's your nafs. And so we see this around us, today, where people are constantly even changing Allah's words or minimizing them to, fit their lower desire and their false understandings. Because it's uncomfortable to assess our own interpretations. It's easier to say, no, let me stick with this interpretation and let me fix what's external. Let me fix what I encounter so that I don't have to change. And a lot of people do that. People do this a lot in relationships. Their spouse tells them about something they need to fix, something that's harming the relationship. And instead of facing that, they'll say like, no, that's who I am. I can't change, right? That's who I am. Why? Because it's like, it's so uncomfortable for that person. It's more comfortable to stay the same than to actually face the truth. So attempting to bend, but there's a great consequence to this, by the way, anytime you try to bend the truth to your desire, and I'm going to get to that. But attempting to bend the truth to fit our desires is something that's increasingly, it's increasing rapidly within our times, and we see this in the way that people are trying to alter the truth to fit their distorted perceptions of who they are. And we're seeing people attempt to bend the desire to accommodate, even mental distortions, true sickness, and society is normalizing this. But truth by default cannot ever bend to our desires. It goes against, like, truth is truth. It can't be distorted. That's actually like the definition of what truth is. It can't be distorted. It goes against what it is designed to do. So inevitably, those who attempt to bend the truth to fit the desire destruct psychologically. And I want to give you a basis of this, where I got this from. It's from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, had the truth followed their desires, the heavens, the earth, and all of those in them would have certainly been ruined. I'm going to say that again, okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, had the truth followed their desires, the heavens, the earth, and all those in them would have certainly been ruined. This is chapter 23, verse 71. Allah's telling us that if the truth followed people's desires, meaning that if truth was able to be bent to fit people's desires, that the heavens, the earth, and everything in them would perish. It means that the fact that it's like Allah is literally laying it out, that truth bending to our desires causes complete destruction. And I think this is just so powerful, because if you think, if truth bending to our desire would destroy the heavens, the earth, and everything in them, how do you think truth bending to our desire would destroy us? It would destroy us too, right? Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, in all different ways. I gave the example last time about how you know, that the physical body has its own nutrition, and you know, we know that our physical body needs food and water, right? If you tried to give it sand, you would destroy your physical body, because you're literally trying to, let's say there are people who say, I like to eat sand. You know, it's an illness, but they're trying to take the truth and bend it to their desire. And if they do that, will they destroy themselves? Absolutely. We know drugs are bad, drugs are harmful. But a person says, my desires, I like drugs. That drug will destroy them. So anytime you actually try to bend the truth to fit your nafs, to fit your desires, you are on the way of destruction. And we see this on so many examples with drugs, with, you know, just even like not facing certain truths, and you trying to bend certain people, like narcissists, they manipulate the truth. Why? They try to get what is gaslighting? What is manipulation? It's you try to distort the truth to fit your own desires or your perception of yourself, right? That you want to portray. You're trying to literally alter the truth so you can be happy. When you lie, what are you doing when you lie? You're altering the truth to fit your desires. So this doesn't have to be, you know, on a grand scale. It could be just even, you know, these examples that I'm giving, where people try to alter certain truths that they face in life so that they can stay in their comfort zone. No, this can't be true. What is denial, essentially, right? It's like you're denying the truth so that you can stay comfortable. You're rejecting the truth so you can stay comfortable. It might not be necessarily altering it, but I'm just giving you an example so you see how the human being can have this tendency to do whatever they need to do to stay comfortable and to worship their desires. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us in the Quran? He gives us the example of those who take their desires as their Lord. So you can worship anything, and you can worship your desires. And when you worship your desires, you will try to get the truth to bend to your desire. So as you're reading this, you know, I want you to be aware of the great consequence of trying to manipulate the truth in your life, of trying to alter the truth in your life. And just even, you know, and even beyond that, rejecting the truth in certain aspects of your life. I know, it's not the same as altering, but there are many times where people reject the truth because they want to stay comfortable. But that comes with a cost. Anytime you reject the truth, anytime you deny the truth, anytime you manipulate the truth, you alter the truth, who suffers? You. So there is a great consequence to us not living authentically, not aligning ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is al-haq himself, not anchoring ourselves in truth. But the more you anchor yourself in truth, the more you prioritize truth. The more you prioritize Allah, who is al-haq, the more you actually cannot live in a way that is untruthful. You become so sensitive to anything that isn't truthful. And again, Allah starts to unveil your heart. You start to see truth and falsehood as falsehood. And you recognize truth even if the whole world says it's false. And that's really the superpower of being a Muslim and being a believer, is that Allah guides your heart to now see. You have basira, which is a greater level of sight. And that is what we want. But we want that on all levels. We want to be able to see ourselves accurately. We want to see the truth of ourselves. We want to see the truth of what's happening. We want to be able to process what's happening in Gaza in a truthful way. You know, we want to be able to process our own difficulties in life and our own blessings and everything that we witness in a truthful way. So you cannot live without truth. You cannot function without truth. You cannot grow in the absence of truth. You need truth constantly. So it's always good to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, you know, increase me in sidq, increase me in truthfulness. Allow me to see truth as truth and guide me to follow it, and allow me to see falsehood as falsehood and guide me to avoid it. Always understanding that this heart has this need and is designed to recognize truth. It's designed to seek truth. The 10th principle is that we are required to follow truth. So I just want to quickly go over just the journey of these core principles real quick before we get to this final one, because the final one is important. I know it's been 2 weeks since we last went over them. So first principle was what? Can anyone remember? God himself is the truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has named himself Al-Haq. He is the source of truth. The second principle is Allah is truthful, for only truthfulness is befitting for Al-Haq, right? So only the one who has named himself the truth will speak the truth, will send everything down with the truth. Only truthfulness is only befitting for Allah is truthful, for only truthfulness is befitting for Al-Haq, right? And I mentioned how Allah several times throughout the Quran constantly reminds us that he's speaking the truth when he doesn't need to. Why? Because he loves us and he knows that, and he wants us to be able to trust him, to have this strong relationship. Allah doesn't need to tell us that he's speaking the truth, but that's what you do when you love someone. You want to secure, you want to make them feel secure, you want to secure their trust in you. The third principle is only Allah is most worthy of showing the truth. Why would we want to depend on anyone other than Allah for the truth? Right. The fourth principle is everything Allah sent to humanity is truth. Okay. The fifth principle is Allah created with truth, and these are all rooted in, you know, several verses in the Quran, that Allah sent down everything with the truth, right? So Allah tells us in the Quran, he's the one who created the heavens and the earth in truth. On the day of judgment, he'll say, be, and there will be. His command is truth. Another verse, Allah created the heavens and the earth with truth. So truth is the root of everything that Islam came down with. The sixth principle is Allah sent truth to guide, and we talked about truth being the equivalence of guidance. The seventh principle is Allah only judges with the truth. The eighth principle is truth will be victorious over falsehood. This is my favorite one, where truth will come, falsehood will vanish. As long as truth exists, falsehood cannot exist. Meaning that, you know, just as long as you see a sliver of light, it's no longer completely dark, right? Once light comes, darkness vanishes. Once truth comes, falsehood vanishes. And again, you can find these in my book, The Compass Home, for those like who missed it and want to review them. The ninth, what did I say? The eighth principle, right? The ninth principle that we just went over is truth does not bend to our desires. And then finally, the 10th principle is that what's left? We are required to follow the truth. We started off with Allah is the truth. He sent everything down with truth. He speaks the truth. But now what's left? You have everything you need. So how can we not follow it? You have everything you need logically, emotionally, psychologically. You have proof. You have everything you need to actually be required now to follow the truth. You have no excuse. That's what I'm saying. That's why I left this as the 10th principle, because I could have started with we are required to follow the truth. But psychologically, and the way even Allah works, is that He solidifies the heart. Even if you look at the revelation, right? What came down first? It wasn't the rules of halal and haram. It was who He is, the akhirah, right? Jannah, belief in His oneness, tawheed, right? Till the hearts were so connected to who Allah is and what He has sent down. They said that when the ruling of alcohol came, the streets of Medina were filled with, people were just pouring it into the streets. That's how easily they obeyed the command. Were flowing with alcohol. Why? Because that's how easily they obeyed the command of no alcohol. The hearts were connected. The hearts knew who Allah was. To wrap. Now we follow. So that's why this is the last principle, is that we are required to follow the truth. If Allah emphasized truth so significantly, it is because it is so important that we seek it, that we connect deeply to it, that we follow it and live by it. And so truth does not just exist so we can acknowledge it. That's not the purpose of truth. Because we do that, right? Oh, that's so true. That's so true. That's true, right? We do that all the time. So truth does not just exist so we can acknowledge it. And this is where the heart over mind and ego experience plays in, is that sometimes we're just satisfied having information. But the heart says, wait, no, do I live by it? So heart over mind. Not that the mind is not powerful. I always say that. The mind is very powerful. But you've gathered that information, but now the heart is like, wait, do we live by it? Is it just a claim on our tongue? Is it just something we have? Or is it something we know? Is it just information stored? Or is it something that I deeply know, right? So truth does not just exist so we can acknowledge it. But so that it is a lived reality that beautifies our inner and outer worlds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, Surah Al-Asr, by the passage of time, or by the time, surely humanity is in grave loss, except those who have faith, do good, and urge each other to the truth. Urge each other to the truth. And urge each other to perseverance. You know, we read the surah a lot, but we often miss, it's such a simple surah, but Allah here is telling you, like, everyone is in loss in humanity except those who do good and urge each other to the truth and essentially preserve the truth and urge each other to perseverance. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, there are some among the people of Musa who guide with the truth and establish justice accordingly. So an example of a people who emphasize the truth throughout the Quran. There's so many verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us to hold on to truth, to follow the truth, to follow the guidance that was sent down. So these 10 principles are the foundation of sacred authenticity, sidq and haqq, and living truthfully. Without understanding these core principles, we won't prioritize aligning ourselves with the truths that God taught us. That's why in my book, before I even get into an Islamic psychological view of ourselves and how to deal with our inner faculties, and I have to go over this because why would you prioritize following truth or any other truth if you don't really understand the power of truth in your life, or what a gift truth is in our lives? And you really see this in just people who have been living in darkness, or people who were not guided and Allah guided them. We have so much to learn from reverts. That's why I always tell you guys I love learning from reverts, and I love listening to their stories, because you really see how much they cherish truth, how much they don't take it for granted. Where a lot of times people are born Muslim, especially if they grow up in households that they grow up with Islam. It can be so easy to take it for granted. It can be so easy to not realize what a gift it is to have just truth, to have just Islam. And so when you value truth, you just become so much more attuned to it. And you realize, I don't want anything else. I know what it feels like to not have it. It's the same thing with anything, when people, for example, start working on themselves and then they'll say, oh, I can't believe I've been living any other way, and I can't believe now that I connected to this truth. They become just so grateful because they know the opposite. They know what it's like to live without it. So it's good to always, I know some of these things, many of you might know, that truth is important and that Allah speaks the truth and Allah emphasizes the truth. But sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, it's so good to reconnect to things and reignite our connection to what Allah has taught us. In our world today, I think that, and this is not to minimize knowledge. I think it's important to seek knowledge. But I think oftentimes we minimize or take for granted the guidance that Allah has given us, which is the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And I think we try to find ways around going to it directly. But when you go to it directly and you really root yourself in what Allah has said over and over and over again, you just can't get enough of it. And you realize every time you connect with it, Allah unveils you a little bit further and a little bit further. And you realize it's your lifeline. So a lot of times, I don't know if I ever gave this example, but one of my teachers years ago, I remember I went to him and I said, can you give me a book on the akhirah? And I remember, did I give this example? I think I did, but it's okay. Every time we listen to something, again, we connect to it on a different level. I really believe that. Sometimes my teacher he will tell us things and he'll be like, wait, did I already say this? And we're like, no, just say it to us again, because every time, subhanAllah, you might hear something and then you hear it again a different time. You're like, oh wow, I didn't look at it this way. But I remember one time I was really trying to connect to the akhirah, and I went to one of my teachers at the time and I said, can you give me a book about the akhirah? And he just looked at me and he gave me one sentence. He said, go to the Quran. Just like that. And I said, oh, yes, I will. But do you have like another book, scholarly book? I love to read Imam al-Ghazali, and but I wanted to see if he knew a specific. And Imam al-Ghazali does have a volume on the akhirah, but I was looking for something else, and so second time he doesn't say anything. He just says, go to the Quran, just like that. And I'm like, okay. And then I pause because I'm like, I think that's what I'm going to get today, right? And I'm like, I'm trying to reflect on it too actively, because I'm like, he has to be doing this for a reason, because, I'm wondering like why he's, because he's a scholar and he values knowledge, and he's not minimizing me seeking knowledge. So I kind of understood that he was going somewhere with this. So I paused and I didn't ask again. And I was trying to like take it in, and then he saw me and he said, stop trying to take people with you. Go to Allah alone. And just like that. I'm telling you, he didn't add anything else. He just said, stop trying to take people with you. Go to Allah alone. And that hit me so differently, especially for me at that time, because in so many things, in my life. And I remember thinking, wow, he didn't just answer one question for me. But I think it really speaks to how even when we are going to Allah, we think that going to Him directly is not enough. We think going to the Quran directly is not enough. I need to watch a YouTube video. I need to, right? Like, let me go listen to this lecture first before I go to the Quran. Or maybe like I can read a book, maybe there's a lecture, maybe I can go talk to somebody, like we do have a hesitance to, and it's from shaitan. I really believe that. Shaitan wants to minimize, or not minimize, he wants to make it heavy for us to go to Allah alone, because that's where he knows all the treasure lies. So he wants you to keep looking. Oh, maybe I'll just wait. I'll go here, I'll go here, I'll go here, I'll go here. And then time passes and you realize, wow, I haven't actually directly connected to the Quran. And I'm telling you, when I say that he only said one sentence to me, that was literally what he said. And once he said it, I went to him. And this happened actually a few times in my life, where there are things that I was actively searching for, questions, things that I wanted to understand. And when Allah revealed the answer, it came in the form of one sentence, and I didn't need to ask anything further. I'll give you more examples down the road, but that day when he said that, I didn't say, what do you mean by that? I didn't, because it was just like, it hit me like an arrow. I was like, wow. And I reflected on that, and it stays with me whenever it feels heavy. And we look for all the ways to distract us except going to Allah directly. That's when we know I have to go to Allah directly. I have to establish a direct relationship with Allah's words. And at the Home Institute, when I work with students in the God in Me program, one of the exercises I have them do is connect to verses directly. And I can't begin to tell you how, because like that experience has shaped the way I teach as well, and comes up in my work a lot, where people were like, if it wasn't for this like exercise, I haven't gone to the Quran directly like this in a while. you know. And it's amazing, right? It's there, it's available to us. And once you start, you're like, how was I depriving myself of Allah's words and all the meanings and all the beauties of it that it holds for me? So, so when we want to achieve anything, and I'll wrap up with this, is that when we want to achieve anything, we have to root ourselves in truthfulness. Even like, for example, when I teach about wholeness or sacred self-love, many other core concepts in the program is that I have to teach authenticity is one of the key ingredients and steps to experiencing even self-love towards yourself, because it has to be rooted in your relationship with the most loving. It has to be rooted in your relationship with Allah. So our rooting in truth is essential for our holistic growth and anything we want to achieve. And I hope that the key takeaway that you got from these principles is that to make sure you have, above all, to make sure you have a direct relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with His words. Because if you don't, and as I said in the very beginning, if you don't have a relationship with Allah's words, the words of the world, the words of society, your own words, your own narratives will be the powerful force in your life. But if you connect to Allah's words and you're deeply connected to His words, Allah's words will override the words of the people, your own unhealthy narratives, the words of society, anything else you're exposed to. It overrides, it becomes the powerful force in your life, the guiding force. So I'll stop here and take questions. I didn't? Okay. I meant, I think it's because I wrote it in my book. I think that's why I think I said it.
Yeah. Something I read in your book. It's in a different section.
Mm-hmm.
When you said you can't love what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, like what you're talking about, it's all like us learning about Allah
Mm-hmm.
in order to connect to Him that deeply.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we just need to learn about Him.
Hmm?
We just need to learn about Him.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who didn't hear, she was saying that in my book I mentioned that you can't love what you don't know, and I mean this is just the universal truth, right? Like we know this in relationships. We know this. If someone comes up to you and says I love you, right? So you'd be like, whoa, like it's a little scary, right? Because you don't know me, right? You'd be like, what do you mean you don't know me? So knowledge is the prerequisite of love, and a lot of times when we don't have a deep connection with Allah, it's because we don't know Him enough, you know, and He hasn't moved from us. He has given us everything we need. He has given us truth, and we just need to be connected to that. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay. All right. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. And I will see you guys next time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all.